Okay, lots of sunlight today, and it is actually getting colder. You can really feel it when you're walking out here anyways. And with that in mind, what did I read today? How about this first one? More news about airports apparently having drones flying around the area and causing chaos. This one here says, drone causes flight delays at Palma Airport. The presence of a drone in the area near the runways at Palma Airport on Sunday evening caused some flight delays and diversions. The incident occurred around 7 p.m. and lasted for roughly half an hour. At 7:39 p.m., the air navigation company ENAIR announced that the operations had restarted but was asking passengers to check airlines information. Planes could be seen circling near the airport, ENAIR having temporarily suspended all landing and takeoff. By the time that operations restarted, it was confirmed that there was no danger. One, it makes me wonder, was it actually a drone? Because in so many cases, they say it's a drone that did this and that, but it ends up being nothing or something else. I mean, in some cases, they ended up being things like plastic bags, for example. And the other thing is, let's just say it was a drone, since they say it posed no danger. Was it one of those things where they saw, for example, okay, look, it's something so far away or whatever, it's this height, so no worries. Because in general, it's that thing again, just find ways to take care of it. It's kind of crazy. But let's just say if it was some 5-gram drone flying, I don't know, it's within 1 kilometer, but the person's flying below tree lines is some kid. I mean, that's ridiculous. If you're closing down, let's just say, all airport operations in that way just because of that. I mean, find ways to deal with it, huh? Because in terms of dangerous drones, I think it's stuff like this you should be worried about. This was kind of interesting, as apparently there was this video posted. I suppose it's kind of like propaganda video, if that's what you want to say anyways, in terms of one side saying, look how strong we are. But in this case, they basically use drones, I guess, as weapons per se. It's in relation to the war between Ukraine and Russia, where drones have been used a lot. And there was this piece where it says this is about the pilots of RUBAK Prime unit. It says on the North Slobozhanki direction, operators of UAVs, drones for example, from the RUBAK Prime unit of the 5th Border Detachment play an important role in restraining Russian occupation troops, inflicting precise and destructive strikes on the enemy. As a result of the successful work of the drone operators of the RUBAK Prime unit of the 5th Border Detachment, enemy communication means, positions, hiding places, and automotive equipment of the opponent were detected and destroyed. You can see basically in the video they're doing just that. I guess crashing these drones into various objects, taking them out completely. And it says, in addition, the enemy suffered losses in manpower. The State Border Guard Service of Ukraine effectively protects the Ukrainian border and is an integral part of the defense forces of Ukraine. Like there's a huge difference between weaponized drones like this and stuff that people fly just for fun, huh? But in a lot of places around the world, they classify everything as virtually the same thing. And at the same time, creating this hysteria of sort and fear where anyone who thinks of, let's just say, a quote drone, they think of stuff like this immediately. Never ending at this rate, huh? And this was a big piece of news happening around the province here. You've often heard of those debates, for example, in terms of land ownership. For example, First Nations people having their lands taken away from them and so forth, saying they should have rights in terms of, I guess, certain land titles. And this case is kind of interesting where apparently in the city of Richmond, there's a particular area where there was some kind of Supreme Court ruling that said the Cowichan tribes essentially have, I guess, ownership of this piece of land per se, like a certain area. So with that court ruling and saying, well, they own the land, I guess rightfully per se, technically everyone who's bought, let's just say, property within that area doesn't actually own it in general. So it makes you wonder what's going to happen there. For example, you've been owning your home on that property for years, you pay taxes and so forth, and now all of a sudden the court determines, hey, you don't own it anymore, like this group does. So what happens, huh? And so this was actually spreading around online, where allegedly anyways, it's a note from the city of Richmond, and they were basically telling the residents that were affected on how this ruling could affect their property and so forth. And so they're having a meeting of it. So you can see here in this, it says, please take note that the recent BC Supreme Court decision of Cowichan Tribes versus Canada 2025 BCSC 1490 made some very important decisions which could negatively affect the title to your property. A briefing paper prepared by the City of Richmond staff is attached for your reference. So I'm assuming they only sent this out to people who were actually affected in general. There was no particular attachment like this says here in terms of the properties that were affected, but I did find some information, I guess, from the organizations, for example, in terms of what they determined was their land per se. And with this too, in this letter, they're claiming on October 28, 2025, they're going to have a meeting about this. And I guess they're trying to get all those owners to actually attend. So a general background in terms of this story, it says the Cowichan Nation's ancestors apparently occupied the area as a traditional summer village called Tulukantinas, and it was used for fishing, gathering, and cultural practices along the south arm of the Fraser River. And apparently in 1853, the governor back then, a guy named James Douglas, promised the Cowichans justice and protection if they maintained peace, appropriating the lands from the crown sales to create reserves. However, apparently in 1871, it says BC joined the Confederation and the Crown issued fee simple grants, which is private land titles, over the entire area to settlers, the federal government, the city of Richmond, and others like the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority without notifying or consulting the Cowichan. So with that argument, I guess for all these years, the Supreme Court apparently ruled that these grants violated the honor of the Crown, fiduciary duties, and constitutional protections for Aboriginal rights under Section 35 of Canada's Constitution Act 1982. So it says provinces like BC lack jurisdiction to extinguish Aboriginal title post-Confederation. So yeah, it makes me wonder what will happen now for all those people who purchase properties. Some theories are, one, the government is just going to buy them out, for example, pay them above market value for the property to move. Two, they say apparently this may just create conflict with more people to fight with each other in that regards. I mean, you can imagine spending your life savings and so forth, buying a property there just for this little ruling to say, for example, okay, you don't own it anymore, especially when you've been paying taxes and stuff forever too. I mean, I've mentioned I usually hear those debates in terms of who owns what in terms of the land and all that, but this is on a whole new level in terms of getting people riled up, because they're saying, for example, if this can happen here, it's going to spread everywhere else afterwards, where people could say they own the land and it doesn't matter how many hundreds of thousands of dollars you paid for the land title and so forth, you don't own it anymore. So it's almost like you just leased your property, whereas at the same time you were treated as a property owner. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but if they don't fix that, that's going to create a lot of, let's just say, civil disputes between people. There were some other viral videos too where apparently this was a topic before, like when it came to things like the elections, where certain parties were saying, oh, stuff like this will never happen. But I guess if this is true, it actually did happen, huh? What would you say about this? That's kind of crazy. Alright, see you guys later.